Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland, get to chat some of the exciting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing that we are in. And today we are very excited to have with us a Gothic Suspense and supernatural thriller author, London Clarke, who is here to talk about the perils and pitfalls and possibilities and opportunities, I guess, of multi-genre writing. It is delightful to have you here, London. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Roland. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, we are delighted to chat to you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great, Roland. Thanks. And thanks again for joining us, London. I know that you have been a user of our services, mainly of our beta reading service. You've used that a number of times, and part of that has helped you with figuring out the idea of writing multi-genre work, which is sometimes a challenge for a number of reasons. One of which being meeting the expectations of your readers. The other is being marketing. There's all sorts of problems or opportunities that come with writing something that doesn't fit so neatly into one box, right? One genre, which is typically what authors tend to do because it's a lot easier, right? Then you're like, okay, I'm going to write romance, and I know who my people are that I'm marketing this towards, and it's very straightforward. But you've taken a more challenging path. So why don't we talk about that a bit?
Okay. Yes, I often say I wish I could just write a simple, a little more simpler, streamlined story, but they always tend to go off in different directions. And I didn't set out to start writing in multi-genre to write multi-genre fiction. It just has kind of ended up that way. But I started out wanting to write Gothic suspense, and as I was writing, I found that it actually would go, kind of more into the horror realm. And then I would try to pull it back and make it a little bit more, supernatural thriller. And then depending on which book I was writing, there might be some historical fiction in there. I love to put romance in my books. There's always a thread of mystery. So they kind of evolved into these multi-genre pieces. And it makes things complicated sometimes, but it's also been a really exciting road, and it's what I love to write. I really love writing all these different threads. So that's kind of how it's come to be. But the beta readers have been wonderful. I just want to say that your all's beta readers are just fabulous, and they have helped me so much. So just to let you know that.
Well, yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad that they help, because I think that's going to be one of the big challenges is finding those people that want to. I mean, lots of people read different genres, but often they are looking for books that are like firmly in that one genre. Like, now I want to read a thriller. Now I want to read a romance. So it must be more challenging to find those people that want to read sort of a mixture of those different things.
Yes, and full disclosure, a lot of times people may go into one of my books thinking they're going to get straight horror, and that it's not usually what they find. There's usually maybe the main substance may be horror, but then there's also a lot of other threads. Like I love to put the human complexities into my books. I like it when I have flawed characters. I love to write about flawed characters, and that they do things that any of the rest of us might do. I like to add in the love story element, and because I think that the supernatural elements often have a ripple effect on the natural elements. There's often some criminal activity going, very, very human criminal activity going on in the books. So sometimes readers will go in and they're surprised, and they tell me they're surprised. They thought, oh, I thought this was just going to be straight horror. And then I was actually pleasantly surprised to find that this was so much more than that. And so in the beginning, that was kind of how I realized that I was writing in multi-genre, because I had readers tell me that I was expecting this, and I got a lot more than what I expected. And generally, it's been a very positive reaction, and not a negative reaction. I will say that, something that the beta readers have helped me with is that there are sometimes that it can get too busy, and knowing what parts are not working in a story, like there's just too much going on. Okay, well, I need to figure out then what parts are not working, what parts are too busy, and I'm going to pull those parts out and focus on the ones that are working. And so sometimes that means, you narrow it down to about 3 threads rather than 5. And I can usually recognize that it's getting too busy, even before they tell me, but it's good to have that confirmation from a reader to say, I think you might want to rein it in a little bit. So that's kind of how I've learned to, make those judgment calls.
Right. I imagine, even though you're writing multi-genre, you probably have in your mind the main genre, right? So it's like, I'm writing a thriller that has horror aspects, not a horror that has thriller aspects, kind of thing.
Right. And there's certain tropes that you're going to have to hit. There especially in horror, you're going to have to hit certain, fear buttons that people are looking for. They're looking for the jump scare. They're looking for the thing behind the door, under the bed, the thing that's going to give them cold chills and that sort of thing. So, you've got to make sure you hit those tropes. And I think the thriller is really just a natural extension in a lot of ways, because it's, you can incorporate the supernatural into the thrillers. And the suspense, there should be that suspense there anyway, if you're writing a horror. So that can, that kind of naturally comes into play. And I sort of look at, one big name writer that comes to mind is Grady Hendrix, who has written a bunch of books that kind of ride the line between the suspense thriller and horror. And he does it extremely well, with hitting all the tropes, but also having, some wild elements in there that you don't expect.
Yeah, and I imagine, that brings up a good point. Like, there are probably certain genres that are easier to mix. So like thrillers and horrors for sure. Whereas horror and romance, that might be a harder sell, right?
Yeah, it is. It can't be, it can't be romance heavy, obviously, but I do like to have that thread in there. That's just kind of, my thing. I look for that in books, but I've tried to write romance novels and they always go dark. So I just gave up on that and said, I better just add the thread in and leave that to people who can actually write romance. But yeah, I think about like some of the big, hit books like The Time Traveler's Wife or, Outlander, Diana Gabaldon's Outlander, that incorporate, these threads, and they tend to have threads that meld together well, like historical fiction and romance. Those go together really well. Time Traveler's Wife has the romance, and they have fantasy and time travel and contemporary magical realism and that kind of thing. And those all seem to meld together well. So I think it's finding the right genres that go together. Like you said, horror and romance don't really go together naturally, but you can add a thread in here and there, and that it's still interesting to the reader, and it can also help with moving the story along. So there can be reasons why hey, this person is in this relationship with this person who turns out to be very dangerous. So it might look like a romance, but actually, he's a demon in disguise kind of thing. So, and I have done that in some of the books successfully, where, you think you're reading about a really nice, relationship that's going on, and then no, it's not. So, and then at the end, it takes that dark turn. So those kind of things can work really well. And I think it's just having an eye for the genres that will blend together. And I'm not going to throw time travel most likely into any of mine. That's just, I just can't see that working, but who knows, somebody might do that at some point and then prove me wrong. But I think that it's just finding the right ones to mix together in the blender.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of it too is making sure that you are meeting the reader expectations, which means setting the reader expectations at some point. So how are you doing that? Like, how are you, when you sell a book on Amazon, you've got to pick your categories. You've got to sort of, do different things that tell people what kind of a book it is. And a lot of those things, are specifically defined, whereas you could do different things in your blurb, let's say, that would make it more clear that it's sort of this mix of genres, so that you're not going to end up with somebody who wants to read a straight horror and they don't want to see this whatever else element in it. So how are you? Yeah, well, I mean, if romance, like we said, that might be a harder thing to put in there, but is there a way that you typically sort of try to meet those expectations or set those expectations?
Yeah, I think the blurb is part of that, making sure that the blurb hits the main points, and that it's not setting up any false expectations. Generally, my blurbs are dealing with the scary parts of the story, because really that's the main part of my books, are usually the scary parts. But I also depend on my cover. So I have a great cover artist, and I really depend on making sure the cover has the elements I'm looking for and the tone that I'm looking for, because some of my books are scarier than others. So, some of the books may be dealing with just, haunted houses. So the house is the main part of the cover, whereas other parts may be dealing more with, the psychological aspects of the story. And so I might have somebody on there with, that house is actually part of their head, and just to kind of show that there's the psychological aspect is going to be there. So I try to do, really show the tone with the cover, and then make sure the blurb gives a pretty good indication that, like my most recent one there, I definitely make it plain that there's going to be some sort of a romantic relationship that is going on here, and that is going to be part of what moves the story along, and that both of these people are going to be plagued by the thing that is, causing all of these issues. So I try to make that really clear in the blurb and within the cover as well, that this is going to be really dark and scary, or this may be more of a thriller, a little bit on the lighter horror light or supernatural light side of things. But I think you're absolutely right that reader expectations, because even though you might surprise them, you don't want to disappoint them, so that they go in and go, oh, I thought this was going to be scary, and it's not. So that's my biggest fear, is somebody thinking it's going to be scary and then go, that really wasn't that scary. So I try to keep the main focus on the main things in the story, make sure that I hit everything that is going to be expected, and then I can incorporate the other parts into a smaller aspect of the story.
Your cover's terrific.
Oh,
I really like, and they're congruent throughout, so they do establish as a brand. I mean, it seems, I know when Craig and I do consults with authors, sometimes the words I hate to hear are like, well, it kind of spans genres, but I can see what you mean. You've got the genre spanning, except you are kind of like dialing it in, and your book covers look congruent among the others on the shelves of Amazon.
Yes, and that's been actually, when I first started doing this, told my book cover designer that I wanted them to look like other books in that genre. I didn't want to be, let's go out of the box and do something crazy, because it really needs to appeal, and readers a lot of times will pick books based on covers, and it needs to look like what they're looking for. I do that. I know when I'm looking for a book, I look for the covers. I'm like, oh, what looks interesting to me? And if it's not, if it's not a good cover, then it's definitely not going to attract the right audience, no matter what your genre is. So yeah, I've tried to keep them, congruent. I've tried to keep the brand there, so that the same lettering is used for my name in all of them, and that kind of thing, to keep it across the board.
Yeah. And I think that sort of underlines the point that it is most of these books are probably fit within one genre, but they include aspects of other genres. And so when you're trying to decide on a cover design and that you want to meet expectations, like that you want the readers to be scared, let's say, that means you're selling a horror, right? If you're selling it as a thriller that has horror elements, it's probably not as important that they feel scared, because that's not necessarily what they're coming for. If they're a thriller reader, they're just, but so you want to meet the expectations of thriller readers and then have some horror aspects or whatever. So I guess that helps define covers and, the overall tones, and make sure that you are sort of meeting the read expectations. I mean, it would be not impossible, but it would be harder to make sure that you're hitting all the right notes and meeting all the expectations that readers in multiple genres will have for every book, right? So I think that would be a more difficult choice. Not that you can't do that or you don't do that, but, because a thriller, I mean, like you said, thrillers and horrors, they're often hand in hand. But when you start to get more disparate with your genres, if you're going to meet, as we were saying, so let's say thriller and romance, a lot of people do that. They do a suspenseful romance, whatever, right? But you want to make sure that there's enough romance for the romance readers. There's enough thrilling aspects for the thriller readers. And, if you fall short on one or the other, you're going to hear about it.
Yeah, very true. And, sometimes you get thriller readers that do not want horror. I mean, they are like, no, I don't want to read about, ghosts and vampires and things that go bump in the night. I just, want the chase scenes, and I want, the kind of what's going to happen next type feeling. And I love those books too. I read probably predominantly, I read thrillers. But and horror is a little more specialized anyway. I mean, it is a genre that is it draws very specific readers. And I'm frankly always surprised when I come across people that are like, "Oh, you write horror? Oh, I love scary books." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay." Because I didn't grow up with that. I didn't know a lot of people that liked scary books. I was kind of the weird person that, loved to be scared and loved to go to these, haunted houses at Halloween and, have things jump out at me. And people thought I was so strange. But I was like, I don't know. I think it's kind of like the roller coaster ride, where you hit that top of the roller coaster and you're getting ready to go down, and just the suspense of, oh my gosh, what is going to be behind that door or under that bed has always been such a draw for me. But for, people who like to read mysteries and thrillers, that is not what they're looking for. So I've really had to make sure that, they know if they look at the back that there's something in the blurb that mentions that there's going to be a supernatural element, or there's something, that maybe she's wondering what else lives in the house with her, and just things that that will point to, this is not going to be, this is probably, if you're looking for a book where you think it's just going to be all, turn out to be natural, a natural event in the end, this is not the book, because there are going to be some horror, horror aspects in here. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I guess you follow, I mean, it's the same sort of principle then when it comes to marketing. You're probably focusing on, what the focus of the main genre, if there is one, of the book. Like if it's a thriller with horror aspects, you're probably targeting your marketing more at the thriller reader than the horror reader, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I use for marketing, I use ads with Amazon, Facebook, and BookBub, and those have for me worked really well when I'm advertising books. They all have a little different targeting system. And so I think BookBub has been very effective for me, because I can target it to certain writers and people that read certain writers. And, I will target a fairly broad writer, I know some people will just target like 3 writers, but I sometimes will target up to 18 writers, and then I'll, go back and check it. And if it's not doing well, then I'll pull that one out and, pull that writer out. And, but I might target, for the horror books, I might target, Darcy Coates. She's really straight horror. And then I might also target, somebody like DM Pulley, who does mystery, and just, other writers who are more thriller oriented. And then I just kind of check the results to see what happens. And it's worked really well for me. It has been a system of kind of trial and error to see what is going to work, because I really didn't know. And especially for some of the books where I actually used some imagery of like a couple in silhouette, that was, kissing kind of in the shadows. And that was actually for one of my more horrifying books, I've been told, but it was some of my best performing ads. So I think that because it's an element in the story that sort of leads the reader into the place that she ends up, the bad place that she ends up, that has worked. That particular, image worked for that. And then sometimes I'll use just a more simple image that doesn't, just has the book cover and maybe just kind of a dark background. And I'll use a review from NetGalley or from a reviewer on Amazon or something, and just kind of keep it more simple. But BookBub has been very effective for me. Amazon has been very effective advertising, and I actually have started playing around with just the automatic targeting that they have. I know a lot of people say don't do that, but for me, it's worked out pretty well, because I'm kind of like, I don't really know, how to.
I think a lot of authors now, it used to be garbage, and now it's almost outperforming a lot of the times when you put in the individual ASINs and stuff like that. Their algorithm is ramping up.
That's really good to know. Okay, well, that's good to know, because I thought, well, it seems to be working for me. So I don't know. But yeah, because I had tried the do it yourself manual, try to, put the negatives and the positives and all of that into Amazon. And it really was so complicated, and it just didn't work for me. And I didn't advertise with them for a while because of that. But when I started putting the automatic targeting in, the algorithm kicked in, and it seemed to really boost sales. So that's been very effective for me. And then Facebook has been very effective too. And I've just had long running ads with Facebook where I just, put it in, kind of forget about it, let it run. And I have a lot of people that come through that just the freebie and the giveaways for the Facebook ads. They sign up for the newsletter.
Can I stop you for a second, just because there are some people who do Facebook ads that direct straight to a book page, and there are other people who do Facebook ads that direct to a sign-up page and kind of loop people into the subscriber list. It sounds like that's what you're doing.
I do. One of my ads does the subscriber news to the newsletter page, so they get a free book. You can, get just sign up for the newsletter. You can get the free novelette that's the prequel to a trilogy that I have. So one of them does that. The other ones do go to my webpage, and people can sign up if they want to, and but otherwise, yeah, they can just go there. And then sometimes I run, like if I run a special, I'll have an ad that goes, to the Amazon page, so they can find the sale there, the book that's on sale there. So I've done it lots of different ways. They've all been effective for me on different levels. But I've found that I've kind of marketed to a relatively broad audience. The one thing I like about Facebook is that I can market not only to writers, but I can also put things in like, people who like the Vampire Diaries or, True Blood, or shows that would have vampire elements in them. So it's not just books. I can also kind of market to people who like, these particular shows too, and people who read, ebooks and that kind of thing. So it's, yeah. And I went from, I will just say this was several years ago, but I went from having like 26 people on my newsletter list to, 1,900 people in a relatively short period of time because of this. Now, some of these things, some people drop off, they unsubscribe, they just want the free book, whatever. But honestly, it's been a really great experience for me to see how to grow a list of people, how people will resonate with my books and they'll contact me. So I've been able to really have some relationship with readers too, that have signed up for the list, and again were maybe surprised because they thought, oh, this is just going to be straight up horror, and then we're like, I really resonate with your books. And so yeah, it's been an interesting road.
Yeah, it makes sense to, the idea of with BookBub and Amazon to some extent to put in other books that are similar as a way to target, especially when you're writing in multi-genres. I assume then you can put in, these books that go more towards the thriller, and these ones that go more towards, the horror. And then when the people see it, then they can decide for themselves if that's good for them, right? And with Amazon, I know, you could have done the same sort of thing, where you put in the titles and all that, but I guess, now you guys are saying that the auto targeting, I guess, works better. So then you don't have to put anything in, right? You just say, show it to whoever you think is best, and they figure it out. But with Facebook, you were saying that you just sort of have one sort of set of ads that works and you just kind of leave them, or is that like, are you changing the audience for different ads, or you have one audience set that you're using and then you just create new ads for the same sort of information, or is it different?
I've played around with different audiences, and I do have slightly different audiences for different ads. So again, if I have a series of books that are vampire oriented, modern day vampire oriented books. So for those, I market specifically to vampire, people that like Vampire Diaries or Anne Rice or, things like that. If I'm marketing my other books that don't have that aspect to them, that are more, psychological horror or, Gothic suspense, then I will market those to a different audience. Those I try to find, things that are more, like VC Andrews or, writers that really are not vampire oriented. Because I've come to find out that even that is very different. There are different audiences even with that, where I've had people say, I don't do vampires. And, so that also is kind of its own genre, I've found, and falls into a different category. So yeah, I only do different ones for different audiences.
Have you tried to create a lookalike audience at all to sort of use as your base and then, break it down from within that? Or are you just using the standard, Facebook's everybody and then cut it down by this, and this?
I have done lookalike audience before, but I don't usually use them. I just have kind of, I don't know, I'm one of those people that I like to recreate the wheel every time, I guess, just to kind of, see if there's any new audiences that I can add. Because sometimes I'll try to add a particular group of people onto, like, say people that like, the Vampire Diaries or whatever, and I won't be able to add them. That's not an option on Facebook. So I like to go in and see if, there's new things every time. But I have done the lookalike audience, and honestly, most things have worked for me on the Facebook ads. I just like to try different things to see what's going to work best. And the ads that I currently have up on Facebook have been up there for probably a year or so, but every so often I'll go in and change the images. And I'll just leave them as is, but I'll go with the, sometimes Facebook will even tell you, like, this image needs to be changed. It's gotten old and stale and you need to change it. So I'll go in and just switch up the image and put something else in there for the same book.
So you have some evergreen ads that are just always running for the same books? Are these ones that are, sort of your the books you're using to sort of try to funnel people in and get them hooked and
Yes.
free and So the reason I was wondering about the lookalike, I was just thinking, like, if your ad is made up, or sorry, your list of readers is made up of like this disparate group of people that like all these different genres. I was curious whether or not Facebook was going to be able to come up with a lookalike that really works, or it's just going to basically give you everybody because you have all these different kinds of people in there, right?
Well, the lookalike audience I think that I originally did was based on the vampire books. So it was really specific, and I only targeted vampire fiction readers and that kind of thing. So I don't think I ever tried a lookalike audience with some of the other books that have a little more diverse element to them. Especially, I have a historical fiction book that is also horror and Gothic. And so that one, I had such a hard time advertising that one to begin with. I really wasn't sure how to categorize it, but I got a BookBub deal with that one, where it was like a 99-cent deal for the ad. And that, it kind of exploded that book for some reason. It just after I started,
the magic of BookBub.
the magic of BookBub ads, I'm telling you, or the BookBub deals, they're amazing. And that book just suddenly became one of my most popular reads. So, and I thought it was such an obscure book, and it was just, to me, such a strange combination. It was literally, it was kind of a self-indulgent book, really, because I wanted to write this Regency that was also, horror, the creepy things that live in the woods that, become monsters and eat the children and this kind of thing. So, but it's been one of my best selling books. And so it found an audience really by accident. And that one I don't really advertise that much, except I do have it on Amazon as an automatic target now, but I just did that recently. But it seems to be doing well, just kind of on its own. I will say it has an awesome cover. So the cover, I think does a lot for it. But I did have some people in the beginning that bought it for the cover and then said, "Oh, this book is really dark. I didn't realize, that this was going to be so dark." But now there's enough reviews up there. I think that people can read the reviews and go, "Oh, that's going to be too dark for me," if that's not their thing.
Right. Yeah. I think that's like one of the things I was wondering too, is like you have, even within your own list, right? So people use their lists to sell their newest book, right? So your new book comes out, you send it off to your list, and hopefully that gives you that great big bump. But with your list being so different, you probably have, even though it probably makes sense to send every book to everybody, just in case, you probably have more of a segregation between readers on the type of book they're going to buy. Like every time you say, "Here's my latest book," it's like, this one's a vampire book, so probably only your vampire people are going to read it, even though they're all maybe part of the same list, right?
Yeah, and I did have some people when I started the trilogy, because it really, with the vampire books, they kind of started out, the vampire stuff started slowly, and then it ramped up to, by the end, it was pretty much the vampires were the main thing. But I did have some people that say, "Oh, I went into this book and I didn't realize what this was going to be." And this may have been either a NetGalley reader, it may have been a Hidden Gems reviewer, because I use your review program too, and said, I didn't know this was vampires, but I still really loved the story and I got into it, and I'm shocked that I liked it as much as I did, and I'm going to read the next book. So I've had some of that too, where people didn't really know, because I was trying to kind of keep it a secret in the first book, thinking that it was, people weren't going to know that they were vampires, and then I realized, I was like, I can't do that. By the second book, we've just got to throw it out there. So it definitely there is a segregation of readers, but I have to say that I think a lot of my readers are they will read cross genre anyway, and so they're willing to read books from maybe even all different genres. I mean, I know I'm a reader that reads everything. Like, I'll read romance, I'll read horror, I'll read thrillers, I'll read mystery, anything. So I think a lot of my readers are just maybe open-minded readers. They're just willing to try new things, to, you know, read books that they wouldn't normally read. So, you know, I think I'm always going to probably appeal to a little bit of a niche audience, but at the same time, I'm okay with that because that's what I want to write. So that's been for me. A part of the learning experience is realizing, you know, I'm not gonna make everybody happy, but I know I'm gonna make some people happy. So,
well, I think one of the beautiful things about self-publishing and the publishing revolution is the fact you don't need to have a huge audience to still be able to make a living from writing, which is amazing. You need to, Nick Stevenson or something talks about 10,000 readers. If you have 10,000 readers, then you have a career for life doing what you love.
yeah, and when I went into this, I really was just setting out to, I would love to have some readers. That was kind of my thought line, was that I don't really care if I have 100 people that read this book, but it would make me happy just to know that, you know, I have somebody reading these books, because, you know, years ago you didn't have that opportunity. It was like, if you didn't get picked up by a big publishing house, then nobody was really going to read your stuff except for grandma and Aunt Jean and, you know, your mother and maybe some friends. But with the way that things have moved in the last few years, it has been amazing to see how many different genres are out there and how many people are making a living and successfully writing books, just, you know, self-publishing and not needing a lot of the overlords of the big publishing houses to do it.
Right. Yeah, because they were always reticent to put out a book that was, you know, genre bending. You know, it didn't fit the mold that everyone else was doing at the time. So it was really hard to sell those kind of things. And it wasn't that the market wasn't there, but they just didn't want to take that chance, or maybe it wasn't as big as, you know, some other thing. And if they have a certain amount of books that they can take in a year, they're going to always pick the ones they think are going to hit a home run every time, right? So all those other authors that, you know, have a great story to tell, that it wouldn't necessarily like be exactly like whatever the latest and greatest book is, you know, those people didn't really have a lot of chance, but now they do. And now that's why we're seeing so many, like you said, so many new genres, because people are actually, you know, able to take that chance and say, you know, I'm going to give this a shot, even though it's not necessarily the most popular thing right now. Maybe it'll become the most popular thing. Maybe I'll start a trend, right?
Right. I mean, that's the thing. You never know. You know, and I know I have a lot of writer friends who write in lots of different genres under lots of different pen names too. So that has also been an interesting thing that's come about in all of this, that, you know, they write science fiction and romance and, you know, all kinds of different categories, and they use like 2 or 3 pen names. It's a lot to juggle. I don't know if I could do all that, but I'm like, hats off to you for doing it. And, you know, they're making money doing it. And I think that's wonderful. So, you know, sometimes multi-genre can be just that you write in several different genres too. And that can be a beautiful thing also. I'm, you know, I think maybe down the line I'll do something similar, but I got my hands full right now with the ones I'm working with.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. I used to write under a whole bunch of different pen names, and I had like different lists for every one of them, and they wouldn't even be what you'd call multi-genre at this point. It was just different kinds of romance. And I just figured, you know, the people that read, you know, my shifter werewolf romance don't want to read my contemporary romance, and they don't want to read, you know, this kind of romance. So it was, you know, I had all these different pen names. If I was to do it over again, I don't think I would go that route, but it, you know, it's a different way to go for sure.
It's all trial and error.
I think it's beautiful, though, that there are some really important categories that didn't exist. There's BWWM, which is a black woman with a white male, which is something that never used to exist in the days of traditional publishing, because publishers would be like, nobody wants to read that. And it's like, lo and behold, that's a massive genre, and tens of thousands of people want to read that. And there are authors writing amazing books, having an entire career out of that. And yeah, it just wouldn't have existed back in the days of traditional publishing. And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things.
Yeah, and there's so many genres out there now, and so many new genres. And I mean, some of them I don't even know what they all are. I'll see, a lot of times I'll see the letters that are up there and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. But I have a lot of friends that write in all of these different genres now. And they usually have them. There's a whole bunch of them, they'll have, like, there's some that write in LGBTQ, some that write in, like you just said, there's, black woman, white male, vice versa. There's so many different ones now. But I think it's awesome that there's so much opportunity for people to write what they want to write. And that for me has been the most important thing, because I was one of those people looking at what can I possibly put out that I could get published with years and years ago. And then after a while, I was like, I tried to do that, and I'm like, I don't like writing this stuff. And I would just find that I would lose interest in doing it. So now I think I just write what I want to write. And then I have beta readers read it, and they tell me either, yes, this is working, or no, there are things that are not working. And I have critique partners that will say, kind of catch things along the way and say, I think you're going in the wrong direction here. And that is kind of, that's like my bumpers, along the side to kind of help me not go too far off into the galaxy. But I love writing what I'm writing, and I plan to keep doing it, and to keep bending genres and defying it as much as possible.
You're on mute there, Roland.
Oh, I was saying that sounds like a wonderful mission to pursue, and actually that's the perfect point, I would think, to wrap up our conversation, which has been wonderful. It's so nice to hear about this, and I think I find it very inspiring. It's, we like to write the books we like to write, and sometimes they don't fit neatly into boxes. So it's inspiring to see somebody do that and achieve success. So, Craig, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Well, I agree. I think that it's really one of the most important things I think that's come out of the self-publishing boom is the idea that authors can have more freedom to write and be creative and create work that before would never have been able to be published. And I'm sure the trad publishers would be like, yeah, it's because they weren't good enough, or they make some comment about, keeping out lower quality work, but that's not what it's all about. Sure, their self-publishing also allows people that haven't polished their story enough to publish. That's true. However, lots of self-publishers write great books, but they would still never have been published because they just didn't fit the mold that the traditional publishers were forcing everyone to fall into. And I think that's one of the best things that have come about from all of us.
Absolutely. And, really, and it's the services like what you guys offer that have been, it's just been so helpful to people who are self-publishing. I really feel like I couldn't do it without you guys on some level.
Oh, we're happy to help for sure. And I think that you still could have, don't worry.
And what does it say? A rising tide lifts all ships. I think that's it. We're all right. Like, neither Craig nor myself or any other people are sort of competing with exactly the books that you want to write, and it's the same. I don't think we're really in competition with each other. We're in competition against traditional publishing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So where can everybody find your books, London?
Well, I have, my website is simply londonclarke.com. And also my books are on Amazon. They're on Kindle Unlimited, and they are on Audible.
That is wonderful. Well, we will pop links down below to make sure that everyone can come and check out your books. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you appreciated what London had to say, make sure you leave a comment down below and let her know and let us know. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast provider or watching on YouTube. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. Thank you so much.